Every new archaeological discovery changes the way we look at this civilization, from strange rituals and inventions ahead of their time to traces of unexpected natural disasters. Join me as we set out on a journey to uncover the untold mysteries of human history. So, fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. The Sibiu manuscript. When we think about rocket science, most of us picture modern engineers or the famous launches of the 20th century. But few people know that nearly half a millennium ago, a mysterious manuscript described rocket technology that was far ahead of its time. This was the Sibiu manuscript, one of the strangest documents in the history of European engineering. The Sibiu manuscript was written sometime between 1550 and 1570 by a German-Austrian military engineer named Konrad Haas. Back then, the region of Sibiu was known for its legends about vampires and ancient castles. But few would have imagined that in the midst of this land, a scientist was quietly drafting the blueprints that would one day inspire the future of space exploration. The content of the Sibiu manuscript has truly astonished historians. Across more than 450 handwritten pages in German, Konrad Haas gave detailed descriptions of new types of weaponry, especially rocket designs he called Feuerwerk. What sets this manuscript apart, however, isn't just the mention of fireworks or simple rockets, but the introduction of multi-stage rockets, a concept the world wouldn't fully grasp or put into practice until the 20th century. Haas carefully illustrated rocket models with multiple stages stacked on top of each other. In these designs, once the bottom stage finished burning, the next stage would ignite, propelling the weapon even farther. He also studied liquid fuel, a bold idea that would later become the very foundation of every spaceflight. And he didn't stop there. The manuscript even describes aerodynamic designs with triangular fins to stabilize the rocket's path, and strategies for combining fireworks with warheads to maximize their impact on the battlefield. In the 16th century, when most of Europe still relied on bows, spears, and primitive muskets, the innovations found in the Sibiu manuscript were truly centuries ahead of their time. Many experts believe that Konrad Haas was the first person in the world to propose the concept of a multi-stage rocket, long before any other known document. However, one question remains unanswered to this day. Did Konrad Haas ever succeed in building any of the rockets he designed? Some sources claim that in 1550, a rocket test actually took place, but there is no historical evidence to confirm this event. Before the Sibiu manuscript was discovered and decoded, many European scholars believed that the first person to illustrate a multi-stage rocket was a Polish artillery expert in 1650. But Haas had him beat by nearly a century. The Sibiu manuscript was discovered by chance in 1961, when Professor Doru Todorisu of the University of Bucharest found it in the archives of the city of Sibiu. This discovery forced the international research community to reconsider the history of scientific and technical development from an entirely new perspective. Were Konrad Haas's daring ideas simply the products of imagination, or was he truly a forgotten genius of his time? Today, the Sibiu manuscript is still carefully preserved in Romania, standing as a testament to the limitless creativity of the human mind. The story of Konrad Haas and his multi-stage rocket designs is a reminder that sometimes the extraordinary chapters of human history are hidden in the most unlikely of places. The Sandby Borg massacre. Around the year 400 AD, on the island of Öland off Sweden's eastern coast, a terrible massacre took place, one that still haunts anyone who hears about it today. At that time, Sandby Borg was a stone fortress, built with solid walls, enclosing the homes of an entire community. The people living here were mostly farmers, craftsmen, and small families. They relied on the island's natural resources and engaged in modest trade with the mainland. One early morning, while everyone was still asleep, an organized group of raiders quietly approached the fortress. None of the Sandby Borg residents had any idea what was waiting for them on the other side of those stone walls. When the attackers stormed in, chaos instantly erupted inside the stronghold. The adults tried desperately to shield the children, while the young men rushed to find weapons to defend themselves, but all efforts were in vain. The raiders were not only numerous, but also armed with clubs, short knives, axes, and even sharp swords. The result of this assault was that almost the entire population of Sandby Borg was wiped out in a single night. Archaeologists later determined that the number of victims could have reached as many as 200 or 250 people, including men, women, and many children. When researchers began to excavate the site, they found many skeletons still lying on the floors of the ancient houses. Some bodies were discovered right next to hearths, suggesting the victims were caught off guard while preparing meals or resting. Several skeletons were found exactly where they had fallen, with no signs that anyone had been buried or moved after death. The archaeological evidence also revealed the brutality of the attack. One of the most shocking discoveries was the skeleton of an elderly man who had collapsed face down into the hearth. The fire had burned through his flesh and even charred his bones. When archaeologists examined his skull, they found it packed full of sheep teeth. In another house, as many as 9 skeletons were found piled on top of each other. The attackers left without burying anyone. The bodies remained where they fell for over 1,000 years. It was only when modern archaeologists uncovered the site in the early 21st century that the mystery of the massacre began to come to light. Even today, however, no one truly knows the real reason why an entire small community on the island of Irland was wiped out so ruthlessly. It may have been tribal rivalry, an act of plunder, or simply a bloody revenge. Whatever the cause, Sandby Borg remains one of the most chilling and mysterious archaeological sites in ancient European history. The oldest cheese in the world. One of the most unusual and fascinating discoveries about the daily life of ancient Egyptians came from something deceptively simple, a piece of cheese. In 2018, archaeologists uncovered a 3,200-year-old cheese inside the tomb of Thoms, who once served as the mayor of Memphis during the reigns of Pharaoh Seti I and Ramesses II. This tomb had been buried beneath the sand for centuries before it was rediscovered. When scientists began their excavation, they came across a large ceramic jar containing a solid white substance that had hardened over the ages. Chemical analysis confirmed that this was, in fact, the oldest cheese ever found in human history. The cheese may have been made from the milk of cows, sheep, or goats. What made this discovery even more remarkable was the presence of the bacteria responsible for brucellosis in the cheese sample. This bacteria is transmitted from animals to humans through unpasteurized dairy products and can cause prolonged fevers and serious complications. The finding not only proves that ancient Egyptians were making and consuming cheese at a very early stage, but also reveals that they faced foodborne health risks, dangers that even the modern world has not fully eliminated. Although cheese is now a beloved food across the globe, it's surprising to realize that this staple has been a part of human life for thousands of years, becoming essential to both royalty and commoners along the banks of the Nile. The ancient yo-yo. When people think about childhood toys, few realize that the yo-yo is not only a popular pastime today, but also one of the oldest inventions in human history. In fact, the yo-yo is considered the second oldest toy ever created, just after the doll. The journey of the yo-yo began thousands of years ago and has traveled through some of the world's greatest civilizations, from China and Greece to the islands of the Philippines. The earliest archaeological evidence of yo-yos comes from ancient Greece, where craftsmen depicted children playing with yo-yos on pottery more than 2,500 years ago. This shows that yo-yos weren't just decorative objects, they were truly a part of daily life and ancient culture. According to historians, the yo-yo may have first appeared in China long before it made its way westward. Ancient Chinese people invented toys with winding string mechanisms, and over time, this type of toy spread throughout Southeast Asia. In the Philippines, the yo-yo was known as the kumu. There, it was more than a simple toy. It was sometimes used as a hunting weapon or for self-defense, thanks to its spinning motion and long string. When the yo-yo reached Greece, it quickly became a popular toy for both children and adults. Ancient yo-yos were crafted from various materials, such as wood or terracotta, and their surfaces were often painted with intricate images of the gods. Yo-yos were not only used for play, they also held a place in coming-of-age rituals. Greek boys would offer their yo-yos to the gods as a symbolic gesture when they reached puberty, marking their transition into adulthood. Like so many toys, the yo-yo is more than just a source of entertainment. It reflects the cultural and social values of every era it has passed through. After thousands of years, the yo-yo continues to hold a magical appeal for people of all ages. The Anunnaki and the gold technology of the Sumerians. If you've ever heard about the ancient Sumerian civilization, chances are you've come across stories of a mysterious race known as the Anunnaki. In ancient texts unearthed in what is now southern Iraq, The Sumerians described the Anunnaki as gods from the stars, beings who descended to Earth to teach humanity all the most important knowledge, especially in mathematics and gold mining technology. The Sumerians' ancient clay tablets contain many references to the Anunnaki. They are described as having unusual appearances, supernatural powers, and intelligence far beyond that of humans. Many stories recount how the Anunnaki taught the Sumerians techniques in agriculture and construction, but above all, they shared knowledge about how to extract and use gold. The ancient Sumerians had a special fascination with gold. They didn't just see gold as a symbol of wealth and power. They believed it provided a connection to the divine realm. What astonishes researchers today is that, according to the old texts, gold was not only used for jewelry, but was mentioned as an essential element in religious rituals, and even in technological devices, described in mysterious terms. Some modern theorists have gone even further. They suggest that the stories of the Anunnaki are, in fact, ancient memories of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the Anunnaki were actually aliens who came to Earth from a distant planet to extract resources, most notably gold. Believers in this theory claim that the Sumerians were taught mathematics, measurement, and metallurgy to serve the Anunnaki's purpose. Some texts depict the Anunnaki giving humans farming tools, or even complex mathematical tablets. The mathematical system used by the Sumerians, based on the number 60, still affects us today, for example, in how we measure time and angles. The Sumerians' precision in astronomy continues to impress scientists, as they were able to predict astronomical events with remarkable accuracy, using only simple tools. Whether you believe in the ancient alien theory or not, there's no denying that the presence of the Anunnaki in Sumerian culture remains one of the most mysterious and captivating subjects in ancient history. Tales of their gold technology and the measurement, calculation, and crafting skills they passed down to humanity are still preserved on the cuneiform tablets excavated from ancient sites. The mass grave from the Napoleonic era. In the summer of 1809, the eastern lands of Austria witnessed one of the bloodiest battles of the Napoleonic era. It was the moment when the French army, led by Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, faced off against Austrian forces in the famous Battle of Wagram. Tens of thousands of soldiers from both sides fell within just a few short days. After the fighting ended, the fallen soldiers were not given careful burials. Instead, their bodies were hastily gathered and dumped into mass graves right in the middle of the fields. For nearly 2 centuries afterward, the green fields of rural Austria remained peaceful, and no one suspected that beneath that fertile soil lay a horrifying chapter of history. It wasn't until 2017, when archaeologists began excavating a small patch of farmland near Vienna, that this secret was finally uncovered. As the first layers of earth were removed, a multitude of human skeletons came to light, many still wearing their uniforms, boots, and personal belongings from the early 19th century Austrian army. These mass graves could contain the remains of more than 55,000 soldiers who died in that brutal military campaign. Archaeological evidence shows that the graves were dug very carelessly. At the time, the French army had neither the time nor the willingness to properly bury enemy soldiers. They simply shoveled dirt over the bodies until the pit was full, then moved on to the next burial site. Out of the thousands of skeletons discovered, researchers performed detailed analyses on the first 50. Medical examinations revealed that most of these soldiers were very young, ranging in age from 16 to 30, and notably, almost all showed signs of serious illness before death. Many of the skeletons exhibited clear evidence of severe vitamin C deficiency, a condition known as scurvy that causes weak bones and swollen joints. Quite a few also suffered from pneumonia, arthritis, or other infectious diseases brought on by the harsh conditions of military life. By the time battle broke out, most of them were too weak to put up much resistance and collapsed on the field, with some dying from illness or exhaustion rather than wounds from bullets or bayonets. Alongside the human remains, archaeologists found hundreds of lead bullets and many personal items such as knives, spoons, and medals. These artifacts provide vivid evidence of the ferocity of the Battle of Wagram and the harsh realities faced by Napoleon's soldiers. What is especially striking is that through these remnants hidden underground, it becomes clear that war in that era was not just about glamorous battles between generals and their maps. It was also a tragedy for tens of thousands of young men, most of whom had only just left home, forced to live in deprivation and disease and to die quietly with no one ever knowing their names. Prehistoric animals, ancient technology, and the Ica stones. If you've ever wondered whether ancient humans might have once lived alongside dinosaurs, you might be surprised to learn about the mysterious stones discovered in Peru. These artifacts are known as the Ica stones, and their story remains one of the greatest enigmas in modern archaeology. The Ica stone collection is made up of thousands of rocks, each carved with incredibly strange images. Many of these stones depict humans riding dinosaurs, performing complex surgeries, and even show a man looking through a telescope. These carvings seem to challenge everything we think we know about the evolutionary history of mankind. The story of the Ica stones began to draw attention in 1966, when a Peruvian doctor named Javier Cabrera happened to come across a peculiar stone at a small shop in the city of Ica. When he saw the carvings on the stone, he was completely captivated and decided to start collecting more stones from rural areas around the Ica Valley. In a short period of time, his collection grew to nearly 20,000 stones, featuring every imaginable size and subject. By 1996, Javier Cabrera had amassed so many stones that he opened a museum dedicated solely to displaying them to the public. He also published a book called The Message of the Engraved Ica Stones, in which he put forward a truly astonishing theory. According to Cabrera, the stones are the legacy of an ancient civilization he called the Glyptolithic man. He believed these people came from another planet, lived on Earth millions of years ago, and were the ones who engraved these images before leaving. Cabrera's theories went even further. He claimed that this civilization possessed an extremely advanced level of technology, with knowledge of genetics, medicine, and astronomy far surpassing anything ever known on Earth. According to him, the images of brain surgery, organ transplants, or humans interacting with dinosaurs were all evidence that Glyptolithic man really existed. The Ica stones quickly became a subject of worldwide controversy. Many proponents of creationist theories saw the collection as definitive proof supporting their belief that humans and dinosaurs once lived at the same time. However, most scientists and archaeologists regard the stones as a sophisticated hoax. They point out that the dinosaurs depicted on the Ica stones look remarkably similar to drawings from the mid-20th century, a time when paleontology had already made dinosaur imagery popular around the world. Images that we now know are scientifically inaccurate. Moreover, the carving techniques show clear signs of modern tools, inconsistent with those available in prehistoric times. Whether genuine or not, the Ica stone collection continues to spark heated debate among scientists, conspiracy theorists, and those who are simply curious about humanity's distant past. Human sacrifice during fortress construction in Korea. In the 4th century AD, on the land that is now Korea, the kingdom of Silla flourished and grew in power. During this period, the Silla people began to build strong palaces and fortresses to protect their country from invasions. One of the most famous fortifications of the era was Wulong Fortress, a massive structure that symbolized the strength and ambition of a rising dynasty. Yet, behind its imposing exterior lies a haunting story of human sacrifice. Modern archaeologists have uncovered terrifying secrets beneath the foundations of this ancient fortress, finding the remains of 3 women buried right up against the main wall. These bones were not simply the result of time or war. Every indication shows they were the victims of a ritual live sacrifice. According to researchers, these were young women, likely from the lower strata of society at the time. They had been chosen as offerings in the belief that their sacrifice would protect the fortress from enemies and ensure the structure's endurance for generations. It wasn't just human remains that were found. Archaeologists also discovered many animal bones, including those of oxen, cattle, and other domesticated animals. This suggests that the sacrificial rituals of the time involved both humans and animals, all buried together near the fortress wall, typically the weakest and most vulnerable point of the stronghold. People in the past believed that the spirits of the sacrificed would become guardian deities, defending the fortress from attack. Before the discovery of these remains, many historians believed that stories of human sacrifice in Silla history were just legends or folk tales. But the archaeological findings at Zhangju have shown that these ancient stories were not entirely fictional. Buried alive with their master. Around 1600 BC, on the ancient land that is now Anyang in China, a brilliant civilization once flourished along the banks of the Yellow River. This was the golden age of the Shang dynasty, regarded as China's first historically documented royal dynasty. Within the city of Yingsu, archaeologists have uncovered one of the most terrifying and gruesome burial customs in ancient history: the practice of burying people and animals alive alongside their master. For decades, excavations at Yingshu have brought to light a series of magnificent tombs, the most notable being those belonging to nobles and kings of the Shang era. What is most striking and haunting for researchers is that in each of these tombs, there are not only the remains of the primary occupant, usually a royal or noble, but also the skeletons of numerous warriors, servants, musicians, and even war horses, chariots, and hunting dogs. All of these people and animals were buried alive to accompany their master into the afterlife. In some of the largest tombs, dozens, sometimes even hundreds of human skeletons have been found arranged neatly in rows beneath layers of earth. Archaeological evidence shows they did not die from illness or old age. They were buried alive together with the recently deceased master. Lying next to them are the bones of horses adorned with seashell decorations, with some even draped in thin sheets of gold on their heads and chests, along with exquisitely crafted wooden and bronze chariots. This scene not only demonstrates the wealth and power of the deceased, but also reflects the Shang people's intense belief in an afterlife, where the soul required a full retinue, transportation, and weapons to continue a regal existence in the world beyond. Through the discovery of these mass graves, researchers have also found evidence of large-scale sacrificial ceremonies. In some places, warriors were dressed in their finest armor, armed with bows, spears, and shields. Today, when visitors come to Yingshu and witness the remnants within these ancient tombs, it's impossible not to shudder at the fate of those who once lived in opulent palaces, only to end their lives in the cold darkness beneath the earth. The oldest Muslim cemetery in Spain. On the Iberian Peninsula, archaeologists have just discovered one of the oldest known Muslim cemeteries in Europe. This finding took place near the town of Taust, in the Ebro Valley, a region that was once the border between two great civilizations, Christianity in the north and Islam in the south. When the archaeological team carried out the excavation, they found a total of 433 ancient graves. These graves date from the 8th to the 12th centuries, matching the earliest period of Islamic invasion and rule in Spain. All the remains were buried according to Islamic customs, with the heads turned toward Mecca and no grave goods included. The appearance of such a large cemetery is clear evidence that the Taust area once had a prosperous Muslim community, even though local historical records hardly mention their presence. Researchers also noticed that most of the people buried here were young and middle-aged, but there were also the remains of children and women, which shows that this was a cemetery for the entire community. Thanks to the intact skeletons, scientists can now conduct genetic and bioarchaeological analyses to learn more about the origins and lifestyles of Muslims in ancient Spain. Today, the discovery of the ancient Muslim cemetery at Taust not only helps to clarify a part of history that was once forgotten, but also reminds us that, for many centuries, the Iberian Peninsula was a meeting point and a crossroads for the great cultures of the world. The Trunyan Cemetery. On the picturesque island of Bali in Indonesia, there is a small village called Trunyan. This village is known not only for its stunning, untouched scenery, but also for a funeral custom so unusual that it is perhaps unique in the world. For the people of Trunyan, death is not seen as a sorrowful ending, but as a return to nature, and the way they say farewell to their loved ones has left many outsiders uneasy after witnessing it. Unlike most Asian cultures, where the dead are usually buried in the ground or cremated to ashes, the people of Trunyan do things differently. When someone passes away, their body is simply wrapped in a plain white cloth and taken to a cemetery located beside a dense bamboo forest. There, beneath the shade of an ancient taru menyan tree, the body is placed inside a small bamboo cage. Whenever a cage becomes full, the oldest remains are removed and stacked with other bones in a communal pile near the base of the tree. The skulls, however, are carefully arranged in a long row right under the taru menyan, creating a haunting sight with hundreds of bright white skulls stacked on top of one another over generations. There is something extraordinary that everyone who visits Trunyan for the first time wonders about. Despite the large number of exposed bodies, there is almost no foul odor at all. According to the locals, it is the taru menyan tree itself, with its thick leaves and deep roots, that releases a natural fragrance and keeps the air around the cemetery fresh and gentle. The name Trunyan also comes from this very tree. This custom is reserved only for those who were born in the village of Trunyan, and applies solely to those who die of old age. Deaths caused by accidents, murder, or in childhood must be buried in a separate location. For hundreds of years, the way the people of Trunyan bid farewell to the dead has remained unchanged. To them, death is not something to fear or to hide. It is part of the eternal cycle of life, a moment when the body is returned to the earth and sky, so the soul can peacefully depart with the mountain winds and the still waters of the lake. The discovery of hallucinogenic substances in Egyptian rituals. Throughout the history of ancient Egypt, religious rituals and spiritual beliefs were always intertwined with mysterious elements that often stretch far beyond what the modern mind can imagine. Recently, a discovery at the Saqqara necropolis has shed new light on the spiritual life and unique ceremonial practices of the ancient Egyptians. A research team led by Dr. David Tanasi from the University of South Florida found a ceramic cup shaped like the head of the god Bes. This cup dates back around 2,000 years and was expertly crafted, bearing the humorous yet powerful features of the god Bes. But what truly surprised archaeologists was not the shape of the cup, but what was found inside. When scientists conducted chemical analysis on the residue left at the bottom, they discovered a special mixture that included alcohol, sesame seeds, pine nuts, grapes, licorice, and honey. In addition, the contents also included hallucinogenic substances and even traces of human bodily fluids. These findings astonished the experts, as this mixture was clearly not an ordinary drink, but appeared to be prepared specifically for a significant ritual. Researchers have suggested that this cup was once used in childbirth ceremonies, intended to help mothers ease their pain or perhaps induce a mild state of euphoria. This discovery not only sheds more light on the spiritual practices of the ancient Egyptians, but also demonstrates that they were already using various herbs and mind-altering substances in ritual activities thousands of years ago. Behind every archaeological find, we gain a new perspective on the creativity, imagination, and even the boundaries pushed by ancient people, mysteries that continue to amaze the modern world to this day. End-of-life care in West Texas. In the barren desert of West Texas, archaeologists have uncovered a story both moving and haunting about human compassion in ancient times. Around 400 to 1,000 years ago, where cliffs and caves served as homes for many native tribes, a man spent his final days in particularly painful circumstances. This man not only grew old with time, but also suffered from a rare condition known as megacolon, a syndrome that causes the colon to become abnormally enlarged. Scientists also determined that he suffered from Chagas disease, which made his condition even more severe. In the last months of his life, he appeared to lose the ability to walk or care for himself, relying entirely on those around him for every basic need. What especially drew the attention of archaeologists and anthropologists was not just the illness itself, but the evidence of care he received. By analyzing his remains and the contents of his digestive system, researchers discovered that during the final stage of his life, he was fed grasshoppers with all their legs meticulously removed. His loved ones had carefully pulled off the sharp little legs from hundreds of insects, then offered only the soft bodies for him to eat. Grasshoppers are rich in protein and water, and are much easier to digest than other meats, an important detail, considering how weak his digestive system had become. In addition to the undigested grasshoppers, scientists also found over 1 kilogram of waste still trapped inside his body, proving that he endured intense suffering for a long period before he died. Yet, this also revealed that his community, despite living in a harsh environment and having no concept of modern medicine, showed real care and compassion for those who could no longer care for themselves. Zerzevan Castle and the cult of Mithras. Hidden atop a desolate rocky hill in southeastern Turkey, Zerzevan Castle is not just an ancient military ruin, but also the keeper of some of the greatest mysteries of Western ancient religion. If you ever thought this land was only about empires, wars, and conquest, Zerzevan Castle will make you think again. This is the very center of a secret ritual that once fascinated and terrified the entire Roman Empire, the cult of Mithras. Zerzevan Castle was built about 3,000 years ago, having witnessed many dynasties and brutal attacks from the Assyrians to the Romans. However, what makes Zerzevan truly special lies not just in its thick stone walls or sturdy watchtowers, but in the Mithras temple hidden deep underground. This is one of the best preserved Mithras temples in the Middle East, and is also among the very few such temples still in existence today. If you've never heard of the Mithras cult, imagine a mysterious religion that was once a formidable rival to Christianity in the early centuries AD. Mithras originated from an ancient Persian god, later spread far and wide by Roman soldiers and the nobility throughout the empire's provinces. What set Mithras apart was that its rituals were always kept secret, with only male members allowed to attend and all ceremonies performed in the darkness of caves or underground chambers. At Zerzevan Castle, archaeologists have uncovered symbols and traces of Mithraic rituals that remain undeciphered to this day. Deep inside the underground temple, reliefs were found depicting Mithras slaying the sacred bull. Surrounding these were astronomical symbols, rock niches for lamps, and many strange altars whose meanings researchers still cannot fully determine. It is believed that within the Mithras temple at Zerzevan, initiations and advancement ceremonies were conducted in front of the most devoted followers. These men, after passing through mysterious trials and rites, would be entrusted with the ultimate secrets of the universe. Up to now, there are hardly any ancient texts that describe these rituals in detail, as all activities of the cult were passed down orally, and followers were required to maintain absolute secrecy. The Mithras temple stands as vivid testimony to an era when religion and power always went hand in hand. The existence of the Mithras cult right in the heart of military fortresses shows just how deeply this religion influenced Roman soldiers, men who constantly faced death and therefore craved a firm belief in the world beyond. King Charles VI, glass delusion, and a strange syndrome in Europe. At the end of the 14th century, France was engulfed in the turmoil of war and power struggles. This was also the era when King Charles VI ascended the throne and ruled the country from 1380 to 1422. For the people and the royal court of France, Charles VI was not just a king, he became a symbol of instability and the mysteries of mental health in European history. From a young age, Charles VI exhibited unusual signs in both behavior and emotion. For many years, he regularly suffered from episodes of mental disorder, sometimes losing his memory so severely that he could not recall his own name or even remember that he was king. There were times when Charles VI ran wildly through the long corridors of the Parisian palace. Servants and officials in the court had to quickly erect large barriers to prevent him from endangering himself or those around him. His condition sometimes took on extraordinarily strange forms. There was a period that lasted up to 5 months when he refused to bathe or change his clothes. Such bizarre behaviors left both the royal family and palace doctors baffled and helpless. However, the strangest and most haunting aspect of Charles VI's condition was his conviction that he was made entirely of glass. This obsession was not a metaphor or a joke. Charles VI truly believed that every part of his body was as fragile as crystal and could shatter at the slightest touch. This fear dominated his every action. To avoid danger, Charles VI ordered the craftsmen of the palace to make special thick garments lined inside with small iron rods to protect his bones and body. He lived in seclusion, always keeping his distance from anyone who approached, and often refused to let anyone get too close. Guards and servants had to exercise extreme caution when serving him, for even a sudden movement or an unexpected gesture could send the king into a panic, convinced he would shatter like glass. Remarkably, the glass delusion did not affect only Charles VI. It spread across many countries and social classes in Europe at the time. Historians have recorded numerous cases of nobles and famous figures experiencing similar delusions. The renowned Russian composer Pyotr Tchaikovsky reportedly lived for years with the fear that his neck might break at any moment while he was conducting an orchestra. Meanwhile, a princess from Bavaria was convinced she had swallowed a glass piano, which she believed might shatter inside her if she moved the wrong way. Even in the military, the Greek general Georgios Sitanas became obsessed with the belief that his legs were made of glass, which left him too afraid to move, and ultimately led to his failure on the battlefield. The spread of the glass delusion has prompted many historians and modern psychologists to ask deeper questions about the origins of this phenomenon. Many suggest that the syndrome reflects the anxieties and sense of fragility experienced by the European nobility in those times. As such, the glass delusion of King Charles VI and similar cases were not merely psychiatric disorders, but also served as a mirror reflecting the fears and invisible crises of European society centuries ago. The King's Evil and the Royal Touch Ceremony. Throughout the Middle Ages, many people in Europe faced a mysterious illness known as the King's Evil. Today, modern doctors call this disease scrofula, or cervical tuberculous lymphadenitis. The illness usually appeared as dark swellings on the neck, which at first caused no pain, but could later turn into ulcers, bring on high fever, and cause severe weight loss. For people in earlier times, the appearance of these strange lumps was a terrifying sign, as they did not know why the disease afflicted them and had no effective treatment. During that era, ideas about health and disease were heavily influenced by the ancient theory of the four humors. According to this belief, the human body was balanced between four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When any of the four humors became excessive or polluted, illness would occur. People believed that the king's evil was the result of bad blood or an accumulation of harmful fluids in the body, which caused the swellings to appear in the neck and sometimes spread throughout the body. What made this particularly remarkable was that, among the people of England and France, the belief in the divine power of the royal family was deeply ingrained for centuries. Generations believed that simply being touched by a king or queen could cure the disease, thanks to the sacred power held by royalty. This belief was so strong that it gave rise to an elaborate ceremony called the royal touch, where kings or queens would place their hands directly on patients and recite a prayer. After the ritual, the patient would be given a small gold coin called an angel. They wore this coin around their neck as a protective amulet, hoping not only to recover, but also to be safeguarded for life. Interestingly, king's evil sometimes resolved on its own without treatment. This only deepened people's faith in the healing power of the royal touch. Whenever someone recovered after the ceremony, stories of miracles spread far and wide, further enhancing the prestige of the royal family. History records that many kings conducted countless healing ceremonies like this. For example, records show that King Henry IV of France is said to have touched and healed more than 1,500 patients in a short period of time. However, with the development of science and Enlightenment thinking, belief in royal miracles gradually faded. As medicine advanced, people came to understand the true causes of illness. The royal touch ceremony no longer held its former place. Historical records show that the last time this ritual was performed in England was by Queen Anne in the early 18th century, marking the end of a tradition that had lasted for more than 1,000 years. Today, doctors recognize that king's evil is actually scrofula, a form of tuberculous infection of the lymph nodes in the neck. It can be completely cured with antibiotics if treated early and properly. Yet scrofula has not disappeared entirely. In the 1980s, during the HIV epidemic, doctors once again saw many cases of scrofula reappear in people with weakened immune systems. The Athenian plague. In 430 BC, just as Athens stood at the height of ancient Greek culture and intellect, an unexpected disaster struck that would forever alter the fate of the city. Athens, then a center of art, philosophy, and politics, became the stage for one of the deadliest pandemics in Western history. The Athenian plague broke out during the brutal years of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. While the city was already facing threats from outside, an invisible enemy quietly infiltrated from within. The epidemic appeared suddenly, spread with terrifying speed, and killed without mercy. In a short time, more than a quarter of Athens' population perished, estimated at around 100,000 people. Families were destroyed, bodies piled up in the streets and squares, and no one dared approach for fear of infection. The source of the disease was believed to have originated at the port of Piraeus, where goods and food were constantly being shipped into the city. These ships brought not only provisions but also mysterious pathogens, causing the disease to spread rapidly in the overcrowded city with poor sanitation. Panic and despair swept everywhere as families watched their loved ones collapse only days after showing symptoms. Thucydides, the famous historian of Athens and himself a survivor of the epidemic, recorded in chilling detail the symptoms endured by the people. According to his account, the illness began with intense fever, persistent headaches, and bloodshot, inflamed eyes. Throats and tongues would quickly swell. Breathing became difficult and labored. Victims suffered from violent coughing, vomiting, convulsions, and developed pustules and ulcers all over their bodies. Many died in agony, with no remedy or hope of rescue. The plague did not just kill tens of thousands of innocent citizens, it also directly affected Athens' political and military strength. Pericles, the city's brilliant leader, was among those who died of the disease. His loss left Athens without guidance in a time of crisis, and many believe that the poor management of the epidemic contributed to Athens' defeat in the Peloponnesian War. After Pericles' death, public morale plunged. strategic decisions became chaotic, and Athens' power steadily declined beyond recovery. Although the Athenian plague spread across the coastal regions of the Mediterranean, nowhere suffered its effects as severely as Athens itself. For centuries afterward, scholars and doctors continued to debate the true cause of this catastrophe. Some theories suggest typhoid fever based on evidence from archaeological sites. However, others argue that the symptoms more closely resemble modern Ebola, given Thucydides' descriptions of high fevers, hemorrhaging, neurological disturbances, and mass fatalities. Whatever the cause, the Athenian plague left an indelible scar on Western history. This disaster not only changed the balance of power between Athens and Sparta, but also stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of even the most prosperous and mighty civilizations. Water elf disease in English folklore. In the Middle Ages, England was not only a land of ancient castles and legends of knights, but also a place where people lived with constant fear of supernatural forces. One of their greatest anxieties was the belief in the existence of beings called water elves. To people of that time, water elves were not the gentle creatures of fairy tales. They were seen as the source of misfortune, pain, and illness, especially those strange and inexplicable diseases. In the imagination of medieval English villagers, water elves were malevolent beings who tormented not just humans, but livestock as well. Oral tales emphasize that these creatures often appeared at night or during damp, rainy days, secretly spreading disease and disaster across fields, herds, and even the homes in their villages. Whenever livestock died unexpectedly, people would search for odd signs around the carcasses. If they discovered a small flint arrowhead, possibly a relic from the Neolithic era, it was immediately taken as proof of an elf shot, meaning that cattle or humans had been struck by the invisible arrows of water elves. This fear became so widespread that a mysterious illness known as water elf disease became common throughout the countryside. In response, the Anglo-Saxons created special incantations to treat it. These charms were passed down from generation to generation, blending herbal knowledge with mystical elements. Those suffering from the disease displayed symptoms such as blackened fingernails, sunken and lifeless eyes, overwhelming fatigue, and a constant urge to bow their heads from unending pain. Treatment in those days was far from simple. First, 12 different herbs were gathered, each holding its own sacred significance. The herbs were soaked in beer to release their medicinal qualities, then mixed with holy water, blessed by priests. When the medicine was ready, a healer or a family member would recite the incantation over the patient, hoping that the words and the magic would drive away both evil spirits and disease. Finally, the mixture was applied to wounds or painful areas, and the family could do nothing more than wait and hope for a miracle. Today, modern researchers and doctors looking back at water elf disease have offered several scientific explanations. Based on descriptions of the symptoms, such as blackened nails, sunken eyes, and severe exhaustion, many believe the illness was actually bacterial endocarditis, a dangerous infection in which bacteria enter the bloodstream, attack the heart valves, and cause signs remarkably similar to those described in old records. In an age before the development of modern medicine, what people could not explain was often attributed to supernatural forces, forming an essential part of England's rich treasury of folk legends. The mysterious Cocoliztli pandemic in the New World, 16th century. When the Spanish set foot in the New World at the beginning of the 16th century, they brought not only weapons, ships, and the beliefs of Europe, but also, unintentionally, a series of epidemics that had never before been seen in the history of Central American civilizations. Among them, the Cocoliztli pandemic is one of the greatest and most devastating mysteries. The word Cocoliztli in the Aztec Nahuatl language means plague or calamity, and that name haunted an entire generation as it claimed the lives of 80% of the native population in just a few decades. History records two major outbreaks, the first from 1545 to 1548, and the second from 1576 to 1580. These outbreaks not only made the consequences of infectious diseases, such as smallpox and measles, which the Spanish brought with them, even worse, but also caused the population of Central America to collapse rapidly. Aztec society and many other tribes stood on the brink of extinction as villages were destroyed, fields were abandoned, and forests became silent, no longer echoing with human voices. Descriptions of the symptoms of Cocoliztli, to this day, still chill both scientists and historians. The afflicted often began with prolonged high fevers, severe headaches, and dizziness. Their tongues gradually turned black. Their urine also became unusually dark, along with bouts of intense diarrhea. Patients often suffered from severe abdominal and chest pain, and many people died just a few days after falling ill. The disease spread with such speed and had such a high fatality rate that rural communities could not bury the dead in time, and mass graves became a familiar sight throughout Central America during that period. For centuries, the true cause of the Cocoliztli pandemic has remained a major mystery. Only in recent years, thanks to advances in ancient DNA analysis technology, have scientists been able to partially approach the truth. By analyzing DNA from the teeth of victims buried in mass graves, researchers discovered traces of the bacterium Salmonella enterica, especially the paratyphi C strain, a bacterium that can cause typhoid fever. This discovery sheds light on the possibility that Cocoliztli may have been a rare form of typhoid fever that caused large-scale outbreaks in Central America. However, many scientists still believe that this conclusion is not convincing enough. The symptoms of Cocoliztli do not completely match those of typical Salmonella infection. The unusually fast spread and high mortality rate of Cocoliztli still remain a big question mark. Most likely, this was the result of a combination of a dangerous bacterium, harsh environmental conditions, and a severe decline in immunity among indigenous communities due to hunger, war, and unusual climate changes. Some scholars believe that severe droughts in the 16th century caused a lack of clean water, crop failures, and malnutrition. Weakened immune systems created conditions for the epidemic to spread at a terrifying speed. Thus, Cocoliztli was not just a disease, but a tragedy for an entire civilization facing the brutal combination of natural disasters, conflict, and strange new pathogens. To this day, Cocoliztli remains a mystery with no complete answer. That epidemic left a deep scar in the history of Central America and stands as proof of the fragility of humanity in the face of the destructive power of nature and disease, especially during times of great upheaval in human history. The Great Flood Hypothesis and Traces of Ancient Floods. For many years, the Great Sphinx of Giza has been at the center of intense debate among scientists and archaeologists around the world. The Sphinx is an icon of ancient Egypt, carved from a massive block of limestone and weathered over thousands of years by the desert's wind and sand. However, there is a hypothesis that has sparked much controversy: the theory that it was water, not sand and wind, that created the deep erosion marks running along the body of the Sphinx. Some experts believe the long channels on the Sphinx's body are identical to the traces we often see on cliffs shaped by centuries of running water. They argue that if only wind and sand were involved, the Sphinx's surface would be only lightly abraded and the deep, wide channels could only be left by water. This idea leads to an even bolder hypothesis: that ancient Egypt once experienced a massive flood, possibly the very same great flood recounted in the Bible. Some researchers believe this deluge submerged the entire area around the pyramids and the Sphinx. Although the colossal blocks of the pyramids and Sphinx survived, the power of the floodwaters altered the original form of the Sphinx, leaving behind the visible erosion that can still be seen today. Supporters of this theory also cite ancient documents describing unusually heavy rains and high river levels that caused Egypt to be inundated. Beyond the Sphinx, evidence of ancient flooding has also appeared in underground cemeteries and tombs at Luxor. When archaeologists opened tombs from the Middle Kingdom, they found that many mummies and coffins had been infiltrated by water. The wrappings around the mummies had rotted away, the wood of the coffins had swollen and warped, and water damage remained clearly visible. Some scientists argue this cannot be explained by ordinary groundwater, as many of the tombs were built at high elevations. Such a phenomenon could only happen if the area had once experienced a flood powerful enough to raise water levels and submerge an entire cemetery. These discoveries have sparked intense debate among the international academic and archaeological community. Some believe that what is being uncovered today is only the tip of the iceberg, a remnant of a natural disaster that once devastated ancient Egypt. If the theories of a great flood and massive inundations are true, we may have to reevaluate the history of Egyptian civilization from a completely new perspective. Perhaps the grand monuments left behind by the Egyptians are not only human achievements, but also silent witnesses to catastrophic natural upheavals. And perhaps it was precisely those disasters that helped shape a civilization with extraordinary resilience and adaptability, allowing it to survive for thousands of years despite the ever-changing forces of nature and time. the animal mummy market of ancient Egypt, and the intact mummified falcon. Throughout the long history of ancient Egypt, animals always held a special place in both religion and spiritual life. Egyptians worshipped many animals as embodiments of the gods, and among them, the falcon was considered the symbol of the mighty Horus, the god of the sky and protector of the Egyptian throne. Beyond belief, the practice of animal mummification became an essential part of religious rituals, and even gave rise to a vibrant mummy market that thrived for centuries. One of the clearest recent examples of the enduring fascination with Egyptian animal mummies was just recorded. An intact mummified falcon dating to the 26th dynasty, around the 6th to 7th century BC, appeared at a major auction in Abu Dhabi. What drew special attention from collectors and archaeologists was the remarkably preserved condition of this artifact. The entire mummy was still sealed inside a small wooden coffin, wrapped in ancient linen, with the falcon's head painted beige and detailed with sharp black markings to highlight the majestic appearance of this sacred bird. Archaeological experts conducted X-ray scans and confirmed that the falcon's skeleton had retained its original shape, with every small bone still in place, a rarity for animal mummies that have spent over 2,000 years underground. Except for a broken right wing, likely the result of a ritual sacrifice, the falcon mummy was nearly perfect. Its value soared to nearly $90,000 at auction, reflecting the modern world's passion for the mysterious and sacred legacy left behind by the ancient Egyptians. The story of the mummified falcon not only demonstrates the sophisticated technique of animal mummification, but also serves as evidence of a mummy market that stretched from antiquity all the way to the present. Each artifact like this is not just a valuable antique. It is a doorway to the past, giving us a deeper look into the beliefs, traditions, and spirituality of a civilization that once ruled the banks of the Nile. The Noah hypothesis and ancient Egyptian technology. For centuries, the story of Noah and his ark has been an essential part of Western culture, inseparable from the image of a devoted old man building a vessel to save life from the great flood in the Bible. However, today, many researchers are starting to ask, was Noah merely a legendary figure, or could he actually be connected to a great civilization that once existed on the banks of the Nile, the ancient Egyptians? This hypothesis arises from the remarkable similarities between the story of Noah's Ark and the ancient Egyptians' ability to construct colossal monuments. Thousands of years ago, the Egyptians built giant pyramids, deep underground tombs, and magnificent temples, many of whose construction secrets still astonish the modern world. Quite a few people have asked, if the Egyptians could transport and assemble millions of stone blocks weighing dozens of tons each, then building a massive ship to survive a great flood would not have been beyond their reach. Some archaeologists and historians have even boldly suggested that Noah may actually have been an engineer or architect from ancient Egypt, someone who applied the advanced technical knowledge of his era to build the famous ark described in the Bible. Even more intriguingly, structures like the Tower of Babel, celebrated as symbols of pride and architectural mastery, also share many features with the towers and tombs that the Egyptians left behind on this land. It doesn't end with these theories about construction techniques. Many recent archaeological findings show that ancient Egypt once endured severe floods. Traces of flooding discovered in ancient tombs, mummies, and ruins around Luxor and Giza have led researchers to question whether the Great Flood described in the Bible might have actually occurred in this region. If these floods were large enough to submerge entire settlements and temples, then perhaps ancient stories really did record memories of a disaster that once took place in human history. The hypothesis connecting Noah, Egyptian engineering, and the Great Flood not only challenges our traditional understanding, but also opens a new approach, one that helps link the mysteries of the Bible with the archaeological heritage still present in Egypt today. Sometimes, the truth about the past is found where we least expect it, beneath the golden sands of the desert and under the stones of the pyramids. The lives of ancient Egyptian scribes, the first office workers in history. When people think of ancient Egyptian civilization, most imagine powerful pharaohs, majestic pyramids, or the mystical rituals surrounding the gods. However, behind the prosperity of the entire empire were the silent figures, the ancient scribes, who can be seen as history's very first office workers. They were the ones who recorded and preserved all knowledge, events, laws, and legends, helping to build the management systems and social organization of their time. Modern archaeological research has opened up a realistic and humanizing view of the lives of this class of scribes. The skeletons found at the Abusir cemetery, dating from around 2700 BC to 2180 BC, show that they suffered from ailments all too familiar to today's office workers. Scientists discovered signs of joint degeneration, back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, and even jaw problems in the remains identified as scribes. The cause was that they had to sit for hours, bent over sheets of papyrus, writing out lengthy documents with primitive tools. Though their work was repetitive, demanding, and left lasting impacts on their health, scribes held an extremely important and respected position in ancient Egyptian society. In those times, literacy rates were extremely low. Only a tiny portion of the population could access knowledge and knew how to read or write. These people were often seen as language magicians, valued not just for their writing skills, but for their ability to preserve culture and history for future generations. Their records have helped modern archaeologists better understand the workings of the ancient state, religious beliefs, economic activities, and even the daily lives of Egyptians. Thanks to these first office workers, the vast storehouse of knowledge from a long-lost civilization has survived thousands of years to reach us today. And even though times have changed, the back pain, neck aches, and sore shoulders they endured are things that modern office workers can relate to better than anyone. The tomb of the High Official Kwai at Saqqara. In the journey to explore the world of ancient Egypt, every tomb unearthed can hold a unique story. Each discovery sheds more light on the social life and power structures beneath the shining aura of the pharaohs. One recent finding that has captured the attention of archaeologists is the tomb of Kwai, a high-ranking official who served under Pharaoh Djedkeri Isesi, a king of the 5th dynasty who ruled around the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. Kwai's tomb was excavated at Saqqara, the largest and oldest necropolis of ancient Egypt, a site that contains numerous important monuments, including step pyramids and many other noble tombs. Upon entering the tomb, archaeologists immediately noticed clear similarities between Kwai's tomb architecture and the burial chambers beneath the Great Pyramids. The system of corridors leads deep underground, connecting to the main chamber where an altar and ritual objects are placed, while the walls are adorned with exquisite paintings depicting the life, status, and power of the tomb's owner. The wall paintings inside Kwai's tomb not only portray him in various activities, but also provide precious details about religious rituals, hunting scenes, banquets, and the daily life of the Egyptian nobility during that era. Numerous hieroglyphic inscriptions on the walls have enabled researchers to accurately determine Kwai's titles and roles, revealing that he held several important positions within the royal administration, managed resources, and oversaw palace activities. What sets this tomb apart is not just its scale and decorative art, but also the refinement in its design and the arrangement of interior spaces. The similarities to pyramid substructures highlight the close connection between the nobility and the pharaohs and reflect the desire to endure alongside the kings even in the afterlife. Kwai's tomb is yet another testament to the advancement of architecture, art, and social organization during the golden age of ancient Egypt. Every line, every painting, and every room within this tomb helps tell the story of a complex society where power, faith, and artistry walked hand in hand through each step of the civilization's development along the banks of the Nile. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you found these mysteries fascinating, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming journeys. See you in the next video.